A good boy turns bad. There was a little town in the southwest of Edo State, Nigeria, where 12-year-old Stephen lived a life of constant torment. His appearance, marked by unusually large eyes and a distinctive birthmark across his left cheek, made him an easy target for bullies. But even at 16, he had grown bigger that his birthmark could barely be seen, and his size overshadowed his big eyes, so the bullies still wouldn't leave him alone. Every day at government secondary school, he would sit alone during break times, watching other students laugh and play while he remained isolated in his solitude. Stephen's home life wasn't much better. His father had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving his mother to raise him alone. They lived in a modest mud house at the edge of town, where the forest met civilization. The local children called it the Witch's Corner, adding to Stephen's social isolation. One particularly brutal afternoon, as Stephen took his usual route home through the lesser-traveled paths, 3 boys from his class cornered him near the old mahogany tree. The leader, Chidi, was notorious for his cruelty. "Look who we found, boys," Chidi sneered, cracking his knuckles. "The ghost boy who thinks he's too good to talk to anyone." Stephen trembled as he pressed against the tree's massive trunk. His prayers came out in whispers, a mixture of English and his native tongue. Just as Chidi raised his fist, a commanding voice cut through the air. "Stop!" The voice belonged to an elderly woman Stephen had never seen before. She wore a wrapper made of deep indigo ador fabric, and her silver hair was wrapped in a gentle scarf that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sun. The bullies, startled by her sudden appearance, scattered like leaves in the wind. The old woman approached Stephen with careful steps. Her deep and knowing eyes studied his face. "Child of sorrow," she said softly, "your heart is pure, but your spirit is wounded." From within her wrapper, she produced a mysterious charm, 7 cowries bound together with red thread, and attached to them was a brilliant scarlet feather that seemed to pulse with its own light. A golden chain completed the peculiar ensemble. "This is the charm of Aziza," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Aziza is the spirit of the whirlwind, the force that sweeps away all that threatens harmony. Wear this, and call upon Aziza's name when danger comes." The next day, Stephen wore the charm on his neck as he goes to school, still skeptical but desperate for protection. As predicted, Chidi and his gang approached him after school. "Trying to hide today, ghost boy?" Chidi taunted. With trembling fingers, Stephen grasped the charm and whispered, "Aziza, make them disappear." He squeezed his eyes shut, expecting nothing to happen. The sudden silence made him open his eyes. Where his tormentors had stood moments before, there was only empty space and a few scattered leaves twirling in the wind. Stephen couldn't believe how effective the charm was. He would walk tall and bold now, and no one could bully him anymore. Success changed him rapidly, and he became intoxicated with the power. The charm that was meant to protect became a weapon of revenge. Within weeks, he had transformed from victim to victimizer. Anyone who had ever slighted him vanished without a trace. Teachers who gave him poor grades disappeared during class. The school principal vanished after questioning Stephen about the mysterious absences. His reputation grew, and fear replaced respect in the eyes of his peers. Students began offering him gifts and money for protection. One afternoon, he was confused and didn't know what to do with the powers anymore. He had dealt with everyone on his list, and nobody was offending him again. Instead, they all wanted to be his friend. After a thoughtful short period, something came to his mind. He left for the local bank. On that day, a hot, dry season afternoon, the local bank manager and his staff disappeared, and Stephen helped himself. Suddenly, he began to wear designer clothes and use the latest smartphones. This was hard to bear, and the people reported him to the police. Stephen was arrested, but the whole police staff disappeared, and he walked home freely and majestically. The people's last defense against Stephen crumbled. They panicked, and even the Duke of the town feared and respected him. But power corrupts, and absolutely it does. Stephen's actions drew attention from forces beyond his understanding. The disappearances caused chaos in the community. Families were torn apart, and the town's economy suffered as more and more people vanished, taking them weeks to return after wandering and suffering in the unknown. Some retoons were close to death as they walked in the wilderness for weeks without food and sometimes days without water. One day, as Stephen made his way from school, walking along as the king of the world, he saw a little girl about 12 years old standing by the side of the road. She pointed at Stephen and chanted, "The power that protects can also destroy. The wind that sweeps clean can also devastate." When Stephen tried to use the charm against her, nothing happened. He tried several times, but the little girl was still standing, so he decided to rough-handle her physically. As he made a few steps towards her, she transformed into the old woman who had given him the charm, but now her eyes blazed with disappointment and anger. "You were given a gift of protection," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Instead, you chose the path of destruction. The ancestors are displeased. Aziza rejects you." The charm mysteriously floated from Stephen's neck and into the old woman's hand. All his power vanished at that moment, leaving him feeling more vulnerable than ever. He immediately went on his knees, pleading with the woman to give him another chance to make amends, but the strange woman disappeared. Stephen ran home, avoiding people when he could, and as he got home, he locked himself inside. What was he going to do? His mind ran haywire. The people would tear him apart if they knew the powers had left him. He was confused and afraid to step out of his room. Ultimately, he arrived at only one solution: it was the only way out. In the dead of night, Stephen packed a small bag with clothes and the little money he had left. He left a note for his mother, apologizing for his actions but knowing he could never fully atone for the pain he had caused. As he walked away from the only home he had ever known, the weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him. The town would recover, but the scars of his actions would remain. Stephen disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of power and the fine line between justice and revenge. The story spread throughout Edo State, whispered around fires, and told to children as a warning: power without wisdom leads to destruction, and revenge, no matter how sweet, carries a bitter afterbite.